Rory McIlroy weighing in, this on the No Laying Up podcast. Kevin Van Valkenburg. I'm glad in this new proposal that they have not touched the recreational golfer for elite play. However, I really like it. I know that's an unpopular opinion amongst my peers, but I think it's going to help identify who the best players are a bit easier, especially in this era of parity that we've been living in these past couple of decades. I think you're going to see people with more well-rounded games succeed easier than what the game has become, which is a bit bomb and gouge over the last few years. Honestly, for me, the majors are the biggest deal, so if the PGA Tour doesn't implement it, I might still play the model local rule ball because I know that'll give me the best chance and the best preparation leading into the major championships. Arnold, I know how much you respect Rory. You guys are fairly close. You've spoken at length, even recently, but that you disagree largely with what Rory's saying. Wonder why?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in each of those paragraphs, but we'll take them sort of one by one. The first one, that there's parity in the game, that it's difficult to separate yourself. I don't see any evidence that it's been difficult to separate yourself in this era of high tech, of the big-headed drivers and solid core golf balls. As a matter of fact, if you go back the last 25 years and look at what's transpired, and then you consider in the context of golf since 1900, there has only been two players that have managed to separate themselves in major championships 2 or more times by 8 shots, and both of those happened in this era where solid core golf balls prevail and where big-headed drivers and large MOI and COR, that's when this most separation has happened. The most dominant players have been Tiger and Rory. So I see no evidence of that criticism. The second one, that this has been about bomb and gouge. And again, I see no evidence that this has been about bomb and gouge. If you look at talking about how players who are more well-rounded, what were his exact words? People with more well-rounded games will succeed easier. So the problem with these sort of inscrutable, and I'm going to say it's inscrutable, because it's incapable of being analyzed or scrutinized, those sort of criticisms. And it's never followed by, what do you mean by that? Who has a well-rounded game that is not succeeding? Tell me someone with a well-rounded game that is having problems succeeding, or maybe tell me somebody who has a well-rounded game that we've never heard of yet. So we have a statistic for that. It's called strokes gained total. Okay, that statistic is a great metric. It measures who hits the longest and straightest, who's the best approach, who's around the greens, and who's the best on putting. Now, that was Rory, number 1 last year, and he won the Varden Trophy. Number 2, just to get at the bomb and gouge comment, number 2 was Matthew Fitzpatrick last year. Okay, he was second strokes gained total. Did he win the U.S. Open with bomb and gouge golf? You think about what he did at the U.S. Open. He averaged 310 yards plus off the tee, so he was 13th in driving distance, and he was 5th in driving accuracy, 5th and 1st in greens and regulation. Lockheed Martin wished they could make a bomb with that kind of precision. That is the opposite of bomb and gouge. That's Ben Hogan-esque type golf is what was rewarded there. And then finally the MLR ball that he would play all year long. And I mean, he's talented enough, he could probably still do fine with that, but he would lose 20, 25 yards with that golf ball. 20, 25-yard loss means that, all things being equal, he would lose about a stroke to the field per day. I don't think he would like that. I think what should happen here, Mark, and look, if you really do believe that this golf ball will help the game, this rollback of the golf ball, and it sounds like the USGA, the RNA, and perhaps Augusta, they believe this. I think the 3 entities there should get together and commission a tournament golf ball for the U.S. Open, the Open, and the Masters, because largely it's a handful of holes that upsets the world, that no longer have the bite that they used to have. But if it's true that if they really believe that the golf will be more compelling, that it will reward the best players in the game, but in a way that won't disrupt the entire ecosystem of the game, if they commissioned a tournament ball, that way the expense of this golf ball will be sort of evened out over all the OEMs and taken care of by the 3 entities, the RNA, the USGA, and Augusta National. They have this tournament ball. Well, we'll see if the golf is more compelling those weeks. And we'll see if a different sort of player that is more compelling comes to the forefront that the game hasn't been able to divine out over the last 25 years. And if indeed that's the case, well, then perhaps they'll get more converts than they're getting right now, because I just don't see them getting that many converts.
Yeah, it's a dilemma. There's no question about it. I'm not sure exactly what the problem is, and it's hard for me to develop an opinion until I really understand what the problem is. I don't believe at all it's with recreational golfers, because I think a total rollback would be a disaster for the recreational golf market. And I haven't heard an amateur or 10 handicapper tell me yet that the game's too easy because he hits the ball so far, or that he's not having any fun. So, okay, let's narrow it down to the elite players in the world, of which it's a very, very small percentage. But if you think about it, what we're trying to do, and that's why golf is the greatest game in the world, is fit that group, a very elite group at the upper level of championship golf, onto facilities and venues that are decades and decades old. And in the case of the old course of St. Andrews, it's centuries old. That would be like trying to play the World Series at old Ebbets Field and now, or even though the dimensions of the actual playing field of baseball may not change, or the NFL, the game has grown so much that, it would be very difficult to do that. So we are attempting to do that. As I look at how it has worked, I still don't see a major problem there. We clearly have defined the best players of the world. The World Golf Ranking shows that. You can see the top three guys. They have separated themselves, as you said. And until I see that with this teeny small sample size, it's, oh my heavens, this huge problem we got to solve. But I don't quite see it.
Rolf, I think what the USGA and RNA are suggesting is that at the rate at which it is going, and with the way that modern players, even into the junior ranks, to their credit, I mean, I think this is what Fitzpatrick did, are speed training, that it is, in their view, unsustainable down the road, and they don't want to kick the can down the road. As for a tournament ball, I think Rory pointed out, you may take exception with this, they sort of, without getting into the details, they dialed back the ball at Wimbledon because the game was becoming sort of one-dimensional. They didn't have a lot of long rallies. It was, just serve, volley, boom, boom, and it's over. They dialed it back, and they've had a great era over the last 20 years or so. And then the other thing that I would ask you, Brandel, is do you, to use your phrase, divine out better players when you have more middle to long irons into par fours?
Look, if they roll this golf ball back, essentially they're making golf courses longer. And if they make the golf course longer, and this is one of the problems with the criticisms I've heard of this particular era, is that they just need to make the golf courses longer. Well, that creates a positive sort of feedback loop that disproportionately rewards distance. So if they roll the golf ball back, essentially making golf courses longer, that means more long irons are going to be hit, and the longest of players will separate themselves even farther. So there'll be more disparity and more disproportionate reward for the longest of hitters.
I recall a few years ago, we sat in a meeting with one of the OEMs, and you made a strong point. I thought it was valid, that long irons are the great separator in the game of golf, and always have been. So why not an effort to bring that skill set back into the game? I know they're hitting them at par fives now, but why not to the great par fours?
So look, I've changed my opinion because shortly after that meeting, I spent a lot of time diving into the numbers to find out if the game has in fact really changed. What still separates players quicker than any other aspect of the game is how well they hit their longest irons. The longest of iron shots still separates the best players in the game. It is essentially no different than the game 20 years ago, than the game 40 years ago, than the game 70 years ago. The longest of irons, Ben Hogan, Marion comes to mind, Jack Nicklaus, Pebble Beach comes to mind, Tiger Woods with his long irons comes to mind, the 2-iron into the 11th hole at the Memorial. I mean, was that not a long iron? And who else could hit them like that besides Tiger Woods? And again, if you go back and you look from 175 to 250, if you want to find the best players in the world, they're cluttered up near the top of the longest iron shots. That hasn't changed.
Don't you want to see players challenged on a par four with a 4-iron occasionally? So many of these tournaments now, they don't care. I don't care. Grow the rough 6 inches. Doesn't matter. They're just going to try to drive it down there 330 yards on a par four and they'll take their chance with a 56 degree or a 60, whatever.
What still matters in this game, and look, you're suggesting that there are more short irons now, and the data that Mark Brody just put out last week said that's not the case at all. If anything, there's fewer wedges than there was. There is actually, it's a small number, but there are fewer wedges now than back in 2004. 50 to 150 yards. The players are hitting fewer wedges, which is hard to believe, right? I look forward to talking to Mark.
The courses are longer too now, right? They're back. They've back tees up.
On average, the golf courses are 80 yards longer. And when I hear people say that it takes longer to play because the golf courses are longer, I'm like, I don't know how long it takes you to walk 80 yards, but it takes me a minute or two. That's not why it takes so long to play golf.
Right.
Okay? It takes so long to play golf is because they're allowing players to have these long conversations. And there's a lot of metrics to consider.
Gotcha.
But if they more rigorously enforce the speed of play rules, the game wouldn't take as long. It's not because they're 80 yards longer. But to your question, Rich, the game is still about who drives it the longest and straightest, but not completely, not in the majorative way. Okay? It's more about who hits their irons the best, and then about who scrambles the best, and who has the best strategy, and who putts the best. The game has not changed one iota in that regard.
Hard to know where it's going to be, and I think this is what the governing bodies are looking at. Hard to know where all of this is going to be in 15, 20, 40 years' time. Because technology. These scientists are the best.
But Rich, look. If there were players dominating the game of golf that were terrible iron players, that drove it 9 miles, and they were terrible iron players, okay? Then I would go, okay, something needs to be done. Yeah. This is ridiculous. They really have one major skill, and they're dominating.
We have 5 more days, and then we have the Masters in a couple of weeks to continue this.